I want to bring in our political experts for more analysis right now. Jeff Zeleny, he did just tweet that I am running for president. That's a significant moment in and of itself. But how do you expect him to make his case during this rather unconventional interview appearance on Twitter?
Well, he certainly is going to introduce himself as the leading alternative to former President Donald Trump. He's a 44-year-old governor of Florida serving his second term. Of course, just about 6 months or so ago, he won by nearly 20% of the vote. That, of course, is going, or by 20 percentage points. That is going to be a much easier race than the one he is facing right now. He's going to, of course, be locked in a very competitive contest with Donald Trump. Those sparring back and forth has already begun, but we are just getting our first sense of a video that he sent out along with this tweet. He's talking about securing the borders. He's talking about inflation. He's talking about, as he explains it, the great American comeback. But what he needs to do is show that he is up for the task. So he's going to essentially present the Florida blueprint, as he calls it, those conservative laws that he has signed into a law in Florida as a calling card to states across the country. The question is how those will be received. In the primary, from primary voters, they certainly, many of them welcome that. Among other voters, they may not. So he is certainly entering the most competitive race he has ever run. Of course, he served in Congress and then governor, but this is the beginning of his most aggressive steps he's ever taken, the most complicated steps he's ever taken. And just looking through this video again, he also says we chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. So you're getting some sense of the themes here that he's going to put forth. But of course, he will be taking on Donald Trump, but also so many other Republicans in the race. So Wolf, this is the beginning of this Republican primary campaign. You can feel it coming together. And now, of course, the challenge is on him to make the case that he is the leading alternative to Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're showing our viewers some of the video he just posted on Twitter around DeSantis. Abby Phillip, I'm anxious to hear what you'll be listening for during this Twitter interview that's coming up.
Yeah, well, look, this is going to be a major moment for Ron DeSantis because even though he is at the beginning of the Republican nominating process for the primary, this is an audience that is national. I think probably one of the largest sort of everyone paying attention audiences that he's going to get. So I am looking to see how much he's going to present a message that can appeal broadly to the American public and not just to conservative voters. I also want to see what he's going to say about Donald Trump. I don't expect that he'll suddenly change course and start going hard against Trump, but what kinds of shots is he going to take? Where is he going to make his jabs in this rollout, whether it is in his announcement with Elon Musk or later in the interview that he's expecting to have on Fox? This is a critical moment for him to really show that contrast, and how he does it, I think, will tell us a lot about how this campaign is going to go.
And David Chalian, CNN has a brand new poll that just came out today. Where do Republican voters stand right now as far as DeSantis and his main rival, Donald Trump, are concerned?
Right, Wolf. So we have just a snapshot in time at this starting gate of the race as the most serious challenger to Trump gets in. And what you see is the task ahead for Ron DeSantis. Take a look at the numbers. You have 53% support for Donald Trump among Republican and Republican-leaning independents at this poll, compared to 26% support for Ron DeSantis. So DeSantis has half as much support among these Republican and Republican leaners as Donald Trump does. You see the big difference from March there, where they were much closer together. But it's been nearly 3 months now of Trump and his allies hammering away day after day on Ron DeSantis as he's been doing his day job as governor of Florida and getting ready for this run. And that clearly has had an impact on his standing. But this is just one brief snapshot in time. This is just getting started now. And clearly it's not likely to be looking like that at the end of the day as we get close to the voting.
Very interesting numbers indeed. Alice Stewart, I know you worked with key members of the DeSantis team. Why do you think DeSantis has lost so much ground to Trump over the past few months, and how does he regain momentum?
Well, in large part, Wolf, because he has been focused on being the governor of Florida and has not been involved in the presidential campaign until now. And speaking with the campaign today, they're looking at another number that came out in the CNN poll today, which is that a large swath of GOP voters are willing to look at another candidate besides Donald Trump. That opens up the lane for Ron DeSantis and many others. And what they're recognizing now is that there's no more shadow boxing for the DeSantis campaign. He is in this. This is a brass knuckles whack-a-mole game moving forward, and he's going to be the target, he knows, of Donald Trump, who has already thrown jabs at him, but also all of the other GOP challengers, because they recognize the fact that they have to get through DeSantis to get to Trump and through Trump to get to President Biden if they want to win in the general election. So I think DeSantis will be wise in moving forward to put the message to the Democrats, as Jeff has mentioned. But another key point here is that the elephant in the room in the primary is electability. And Donald Trump has proven that he is unattractive to swing voters who will decide the general election. And so what DeSantis will do, as he has done in the past, is show, look, governing and legislating is not about building a brand or social media or virtue signaling. It is about winning. And it is time for the GOP to do away with the culture of losing, which they have had under Donald Trump. And speaking with people in Iowa, given the reception DeSantis had 2 weeks ago, as he makes his way into Iowa and these early states, he will be very well received by GOP voters.
And Caitlin Collins, I know you're doing a lot of reporting on this as well. What sort of strategy is emerging based on what you hear from Trump's camp on how they plan to go after DeSantis?
I mean, they'll just be hitting him nonstop, is the way that you've seen them do, you know, making no mention of the fact that Trump once endorsed him and what that has looked like. Obviously, this has a personal layer for Trump. They'll be watching this closely tonight. His campaign will, obviously. But I'm also just interested to see what this announcement looks like, because typically, a campaign speech, a campaign announcement is very scripted. You know what it's going to look like. We saw it with Senator Tim Scott earlier this week and the way that looked. This is an unscripted conversation that he is having with Elon Musk, someone who has not come out and endorsed DeSantis by any means, but has certainly talked about the fact that he believes he would beat President Biden if he ran against him and what that would look like. He's clearly expressed a lot of interest in him being a candidate for president. And so I'm kind of curious to see what it looks like to see Elon Musk. Of course, there's going to be a Republican donor in this conversation as well, and Ron DeSantis in this conversation talking in an unscripted way as he is talking about what that campaign is going to look like. So much of this will have to do with things in the future. We don't know what indictments could look like for the GOP frontrunner right now, his investigative troubles that he's clearly facing with a lot of challenges there. But there's a lot of questions about just what this conversation that is going to be happening in this hour is going to look like, and how DeSantis asserts himself now that he is a candidate, because he's deflected questions about polls in recent weeks with Trump saying, you know, well, I'm not a candidate yet. Well, now he is.
And Van Jones, as you listen to the themes emerging right now in this DeSantis announcement, is this someone you think President Biden would want to run against?
It's hard to know, but what I will say is this is a really weird way to start a campaign. You're seeing the evolution of American politics in that, bowing down to the altar of fame and technology and wealth. He's embracing it. He's not talking to a reporter. He's not talking to ordinary Americans. He's not in a town hall. He's talking to one of the richest guys in the world on a platform that is owned and controlled by a single person. And so this is going to be a very strange campaign. You're going to see artificial intelligence leverage and all kind of bizarre stuff. And so we're off to the bizarre races. As far as Biden, I think, and most Democrats, we're just munching our popcorn, waiting for the carnage to begin. As these people start beating the heck out of each other, all knowing that unless a bunch of these people get off the stage, Trump is going to win just because there's going to be so many other people on stage with him. He only needs 30% of the vote, and right now they're playing into his hands.
And even David Chalian, even before he does this audio-only interview with Twitter, I want you to listen to some of the sound that he just had in this new video that his campaign just released. Listen to this.
Truth must be our foundation, and common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. In Florida, we proved that it can be done. We chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. We showed that we can and must revitalize America. We need the courage to lead and the strength to win. I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
What's your reaction to that, David?
Well, this is the Florida blueprint we've been talking about. This is him taking all the things he has done, not just this year, throughout his time as governor, but also specifically this year with his supermajorities in the Florida legislature, and taking them out on the campaign trail as data points of not just rhetoric, not just talking about ideas, but I want to show you that I've enacted them. I've actually gotten things done. That is going to be a point he's going to sell. In addition to that electability argument, you heard Alice Stewart say that he clearly has been laying the groundwork for as well. Listen, they understood, right, that they, just from a mechanics of rolling out a presidential campaign, that they were doing this audio-only Twitter Spaces conversation, but that they needed him in an on-camera kind of appearance to roll out this video as well of him stating to camera for all to see that he's running for president. And it's not a mistake that that rolled out at the same time as this Twitter interview.
So, Alice Stewart, is DeSantis doing what he needs to do in this official launch?
Look, that remains to be seen. Look, I'm old school politician. I like the fact of a big rally with your supporters, a big announcement. It is kind of like a PGA champion, Michael Block, hole-in-one kind of day. The crowds are roaring, you're pumped up, and you generate a lot of earned media. He is missing some opportunity for a great deal of earned media. All of the networks and cables would have covered this announcement live. But I have confidence that his team has a plan moving forward after this announcement. How he does it in the form and the fashion of his announcement will be old news by the time he gets out and does retail politics in these early states and really shows people if he has what it takes to connect with the voters. And that's the most important thing. All the money in the world cannot buy a genuine ability to connect with voters, and that's what the test is for him moving forward. And it doesn't matter how he announced it, it's a matter of how he executes on the campaign trail.
And Sarah Fisher, you're our media analyst. Give us some context on the role Twitter and Elon Musk, for that matter, occupy among today's GOP.
Twitter is increasingly playing a big role within the GOP, Wolf, and that's because there's been a lot of shakeups within the conservative media landscape. You'll recall Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News last month. He said that he would be taking his primetime show to Twitter. You know, we had Daily Wire, a huge media entertainment company on the right, saying that they would bring all their podcasts to Twitter. And I think we're going to hear more from them in weeks to come. And so you see a lot of momentum from the Conservative Party moving into Twitter. And I think that's intentional. I think Elon Musk's message of free speech absolutism, no censorship, is really resonating with the right, especially because in the wake of the Donald Trump presidency, the concept of censorship and free speech has become a major platform issue. It wasn't always for the Republican Party, but in recent years, it's something that they're able to rally support around from their base. And so for someone like Ron DeSantis, he's sending a very clear message to supporters saying, look, I am not announcing through the mainstream media. I'm bypassing them and going on a platform that values free speech. Now, you and I, Wolf, know that that's not necessarily totally true. He's going to be doing an interview on Fox. As David Chalian said, he's putting a video out there. So clearly he knows he needs to do things a little bit traditionally. But this sends an important signal that it will resonate likely with his party.